What's up, guys? It's Forsyth checking in live from Vegas here with my boy Russell.
Russell, what's up?
We got the show tomorrow, and we kind of just wanted to check in with everyone, a day ahead of time. So, bro, you excited for tomorrow?
Yeah, man, I'm super excited.
You nervous?
Yo, just a little bit, man. It's gonna be, I think it's gonna be a big show. I always dreamed of playing on one of the big casinos down in Vegas.
Yeah, MGM. It doesn't get bigger than that.
It doesn't get bigger than that. This is the big times, and really excited, dude. And it's so cool, dude. Because I remember we were both you were starting your hip hop career. I was starting my DJ career. In the EDM sphere. I remember first listening when you were dropping some of your demos and some of your earlier mixtapes, and I thought honestly your stuff was really innovative. I thought the sound was really different, dude. I just remember that shit. How'd you come up with that? What was the inspiration?
Well, first of all, I appreciate it. I think it's I love hearing that as an artist, and to add one thing, I think in this era, you don't want to pigeonhole yourself as this genre or the other. And a buddy of mine, he recently called me out. It's someone was like, "Oh, what kind of music do you make?" And I was like, "I'm a hip hop artist." And he pulled me aside. He's like, "Don't introduce yourself as a hip hop artist." And I was kind of like, "Whoa." I thought about it, and I was like, that's a really good point, because we live in this era now where there's just so much content available, and technology to the point where there's just so many blends of genres. I'm not going to be that guy who's genres are dead, but maybe they are. So anyways, having grown up listening to a lot of music, and at the core of it just being a huge early 2000s 90s hip hop fan, I kind of think that's the base. And then I listen to a lot of music, rock, old school bands, and I think naturally, I don't know, I guess the word artist is the most important thing. And artists can be dynamic and have express themselves in a variety of ways, and that's kind of what I do, just mainly through hip hop.
Yeah,
what about you?
No, I feel there's a lot of fusion between our two genres. I feel a lot of people nowadays, there's not a lot of distinction anymore between what's new, what's popular, and whether this is hip hop or whether this is EDM. I feel maybe 20 years ago people were like, "Oh, this track is techno. Oh, this track is house."
To say, they complement each other so well.
Yeah.
Which is why obviously we connected, just because hip hop to a DJ, who, as you said, used to be just techno, but now hip hop is such a compliment. You produce a song, hip hop is a great compliment to your genre. Whereas I make a hip hop song, but having an EDM vibe is such a great compliment, and that to both of our respective crafts. So I totally agree with you.
No, and it's so dope, man. I feel a lot of the sounds that are really unique now are really coming out in that space between those two genres, and I feel that's why this entire city is really it's so centric on hip hop and EDM, because there's so much fusion in those two genres.
Oh, hell yeah.
And I feel so the top 40 realm, it doesn't really exist anymore. I feel it's mostly in the future, maybe 10 years from now, 2 decades from now, we won't call it hip hop and EDM, we'll just call it music.
Yeah. Well, I think we're kind of already there. We're not officially, but unofficially, maybe people just take a ballsy stand and say, kind of genres are dead.
Yeah.
And if you're an artist who's trying to just I'd say to any artist, don't pigeonhole yourself to one genre. But yeah, and that's why we're gonna collaborate going forward.
Yeah, man. No, totally. That's one of the things. We've been working on a lot of unique stuff, and I really love your sound. I really love how you.
We've got some records coming out next year.
We do. 2019, big year.
Big things up.
Forsyth Russell.
We'll give you more than that. But,
sorry, we're on an NDA.
Yeah.
Can't disclose that.
But I was gonna ask you. We got away from this earlier. I was I always find it very interesting to ask artists Like, what do you get nervous before you go on?
Oh, all the time, man. Like, it was one of the things I think when I was first DJing, I would like super shake when I first got on the decks. And it's like one of those things where like you might be practicing like a million times. Like honestly, I practice probably 2 to 3, maybe 4 or 5 hours a day sometimes. Just like playing tracks, spinning, mixing stuff. Now with technology and waveform, it makes it so easy. But honestly, dude, like when I get up on those decks every single time, I'm always so nervous. Like, what if I press the wrong button?
Then, like, right, but I don't know if this happens to me, but it's like right when the music starts, you're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, it's like you can't even do anything. Like at that point, like once the audience
well,
goes,
then it's like all
like,
that practice. It's like,
yeah.
It's like training for, I would relate it just personally to like a boxing fight. Like, the worst part of a fight is right before. You're just so nervous.
Yeah.
And like, but the minute like the bell rings or the music starts, you're like, oh, like, and you just feel kind of right at home.
Yeah.
So,
and
that's the same way for me. I get pretty nervous before, but, once the music starts, it's off to the races, because, like, that's what, that's what we do. Like, it's our passion. That's what we're good at, so. It's
so true, man. I feel like that's the really cool thing about, like, our genres, is that I feel like with electronic dance music and, like, hip-hop, so much of it is just based on like the creativity in the moment, and just like you go, you hit the green light, you start, and like then you see what comes out of the decks or like what comes out on the verses.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
So what do you have cooking up? Like, talk about your next year, and then.
Yeah. Well, so I mean, I'm still,
or maybe better yet, like after the show, which is going to be pretty dope.
Yeah.
What's next? Like, what's the next move?
So, I mean, a huge dream of mine. I mean, when I started this, a few years ago, like, I never thought that I was going to be a DJ. I always, like, growing up, I was classically trained pianist and guitarist. Like, I wanted to be Dave Brubeck, was really into jazz music, and just kind of got into this in my mid-20s. And so I think for me, like, one of my dreams was always to, like, start a record label and like to really give back to the community. I felt like the last few years that I've been rising in the industry, like my community both at home in DC and around the country and around the globe has given me so much, and I feel like I really want to like give back, and I want to be a conduit for like finding other talent.
What's the DC scene like?
See,
like, you've obviously said you're kind of like a staple there, like, how would you describe the DC vibe?
It's different, man. So, I mean, like, DC's got this really unique history that not a lot of people know about. It was actually, like, the landing place for electronic dance music in the country. Some of the first tour stops that Armin van Buuren and Tiesto, some of the trendsetters in electronic dance music, had when they first came to this country in the 90s and 2000s was right in DC. DC always had, like, because it was predominantly African-American city, it always had like a really vibrant club culture from like go-go times and hip-hop. So, DC is kind of going through this really cool metamorphosis right now where so much of the city was based on like the big club scene and like, people getting decked out and going to these like, massive type show things like Hakkasan and Omnia and other big nightclubs here in Vegas. And there's been a lot of influence in the last few years from Europe on a lot of the underground sounds. And so the underground sounds are taking hold. And when I first got into the scene and started doing disco music, like a lot of my influence from disco is like my jazz background, but also just like, I really love disco. I love like the vibe, I love like the lyrics, I love like, the syncopation of the instrumentals. And I was noticing though the last few years, a lot of like underground influence that's been infused into disco, and you're starting to see a lot of that in DC. So it's kind of cool. Like, I feel like 2019 is going to be this really unique year for me artistically, because a lot of stuff I'm working on right now is really trying to like push the boundaries of disco music and trying to like find that sweet spot between like the underground techno and house culture and like commercialized disco and pop music. Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
We'll do it together, brother.
Yeah, man. Totally. How about yourself?
What's the question?
What's in store for you, man?
I I mean, so obviously, if you don't know, November 2nd, my album came out, Somewhere in Between.
Remember that
That's
date.
available everywhere. So, you know, if you haven't listened to it, go check it out. What's in store for me? I'm gonna build like kind of like a mini tour. Obviously, we're gonna be working together on that. Like, we're gonna have a huge DC, you know, scene. New York, LA, San Francisco,
Yeah, man.
Las Vegas.
Yeah,
obviously, we're kicking it
Of
off
course.
here.
Vegas.
So, I mean, for starters, yeah, kind of like, you know, launch a tour, get a lot of dates together so we can start like, you know, building like an organic following. Besides that, I want to, you know, probably